Well, hello and welcome to our final Christmas Bible study of this year as we look at the end of chapter 2 of Luke's Gospel. So, without further ado, Luke's Gospel, chapter 2, beginning at verse 41. Jesus' parents used to go to Jerusalem every year for the Passover festival. When he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the feast days were over, they began the journey back, but the boy Jesus remained in Jerusalem. His parents didn't know. They thought he was in the travelling party and went a day's journey before looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they didn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. And so it happened that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was astonished at his understanding and his answers. When they saw him, they were quite overwhelmed. "Child," said his mother, "why did you do this to us? Look, your father and I have been in a terrible state looking for you." "Why were you looking for me?" he replied. "Didn't you know that I would have been getting involved with my father's work?" They didn't understand what he had said to them. He went down with them and came to Jerusalem and lived in obedience to them, and his mother kept all these things in her heart. So Jesus became wiser and taller, gaining favour both with God and with men. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I guess we need to start this morning by reminding ourselves of what a different sort of society it was in biblical times. Extended families and friends travelled together, so much so that Jesus' parents can feel that it's okay to set off home from Jerusalem without checking that Jesus, a 12-year-old boy, is still with them for a whole day. On the other hand, we can imagine the fear of Mary and Joseph as they headed back to Jerusalem and as they started searching in Jerusalem about the threat which Jerusalem posed, with dark alleys and strange people and Roman soldiers. Not really a place to leave your 12-year-old. Worse still, they spent 2 days desperately searching, having travelled back to Jerusalem, and no doubt they had to find fresh accommodation for a couple of nights. And I'm sure they were increasingly in despair of finding Jesus at all. So they'd been to Jerusalem for Passover, one of the 3 feasts which male Jews were required to be at in Jerusalem. Women were exempt, but often came. Now, Mary and Joseph had found Jesus in the temple talking with the teachers and asking very intelligent questions. Where had he been staying? And who had been feeding him? Why was he here in the temple? Mary and Joseph were quite overwhelmed, and that's an understatement. I can well remember my daughter, aged 2, in Marks and Spencer's in Wolverhampton, probably between 2 and 3, running off to hide amongst the racks of clothes, unbeknownst to us. We were calling for her, and the entire shop went silent whilst we were doing so. And then Charlotte popped up, thinking it was great fun, grinning away and laughing in huge relief from us. Mary blurts out her accusation, and I'm sure that she, like us, felt a little guilty. Instead of, "How could I have done this to you, leaving you behind?" it comes out as, "How could you do this to us? Your father and I have been looking." "No," says Jesus, "I've been busy about my Father's work." And Luke points out that Mary kept a memory of this to tell him many years later. It's a bit like us, really, our child's first words or what they first did on any particular occasion written down in a book. For Mary, it's crucial to remember everything as it happened. even if she didn't necessarily understand it. What is very interesting is to compare this with another much-loved story that Luke records, the meeting of two disciples on the road to Emmaus who met Jesus after his resurrection. The disciples shared their anguish that after 3 days had elapsed since Jesus' death. And Jesus says, when he meets with them, it was necessary that these things happen. And Jesus uses exactly the same Greek word for another couple who've just lost Jesus for 3 days in Jerusalem. It was necessary that I had been busy at my Father's work. Every time we relax and think that we really understood Jesus, Jesus will be up ahead or maybe staying behind. Discipleship always involves the unexpected. The last few days we have, as it were, visited the temple quite a lot for these studies in chapter 2 of Luke's Gospel. Now Jesus is taking the initiative by asking questions of the temple leaders. So I wonder today whether we identify in this story with Mary and Joseph in their desperate searching and bewildered discovery. Or maybe we identify with Jesus exerting his independence whilst then going back home in obedience. Do we remember something or someone precious that we've lost? Do we remember when we took Jesus for granted? If Mary and Joseph could do so, maybe we can too. We must be prepared to seek Jesus out in prayer and through the Bible and in the sacraments and not give up until we find him again. Jesus will not tell us when we find him what we expect him to say. He must be about his Father's work. And so, of course, should we. So have a wonderful day today, and more next time from Ben as he starts a series looking at the Old Testament.